So if you're the New York Giants, do you sign Saquon Barkley before the start of training camp? Do you sign him? I'm not giving that guy $14 million. I'm not doing it. Here's what I do. I take that $14 million. I go sign DeAndre Hopkins, and I go out and sign Dalvin Cook for $18 million for both players. See you, dude. Nobody in their right mind is going to give him $14 million if he goes on the open market. Not one NFL team would give him that number. No one. He's injury prone. He's a good ball player, but that position is not valued at that. You're looking at paying wideouts. Running back is not a premium position. I am not. They want premium money. If the Giants do this and overpay Daniel Jones and overpay the quarterback, you're doing everything that Dallas is doing wrong. This makes no sense. No sense. Dalvin Cook has had a better career than Saquon Barkley. He's a better player. Look at the numbers. He's a better ball player. He's carried the ball less. He's been injured less. He's got more gas in the can. He's a year older. Okay? I'm not, and I get to pay Dalvin Cook $5 million instead of paying $9 million more. Okay? Come on, man. The Giants are in a position where if you're going to go, you're going to either be the Cowboys or you're going to build your football team correctly. Barkley's injury prone. How about this? He's as hurt as Miles Sanders is. And you're going to pay $14 million on that. No way. No thank you. Not happening. Okay? Just doesn't make sense. Look at Arthur here. And once again, Arthur telling you half the story. It's not a premium. Finally realizes Bijan was not the right move. At $1 million, asshead, he was the right move. Jesus, criminy. Once again, doesn't see the reality of it. You draft a guy, you put him back there. He's a great back. You pay $1 million for him or $2 million for him because he's on a rookie contract. How dumb can you get? Absolutely dumb. It's financially responsible, and he's a great player. And he's young. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So you want to pay for a guy who's injured $14 million, and you're going to put $60 million in two guys who one's hurt all the time and the other guy you're not sure of. Hey, that's the New York Giants way. Barkley is not a $14 million a year guy. He's just not. Okay? Sign Cook and move Barkley to Houston or someone who has a shitload of picks. And get the draft picks for next April so you can get some wideouts in the room or whatever. Not paying $14 million. Where I don't have, get this, the Giants don't have a wide receiver to speak of. They got a tight end. Here's the New York Giants, so you know, Eagle guys. You got a tight end the Giants are counting on who's been injured the last 2-3 years. You got a running back who's injured 2 of the last 3 years, and you want to pay him $14 million. And you got a quarterback who had 2 games, and he gave him 46. And you think your head coach is a star coach. Well, we'll see. Really? You're going to put all that money into players with all those question marks and their durability. Do you know that the tight end is the highest paid tight end in the NFL right now? So get this. Think about this for a second, Yale. You're going to pay $17.5 million for Waller, for Darren Waller. You're going to pay $14 million for Barkley. And you're going to pay $46 million for the quarterback. And all three are question marks. You want to know why the Giants haven't been good in 15 years? There it is. That's why they're not good. Those decisions, okay? Those Arthur-type decisions are exactly why the Giants are in the position they're in. Okay? Sills, you thought the New York Giant coach was a star. No, Bob, I said he had a star year. Like your quarterback. He's not a star yet. He had a star year. We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay? We are. We're getting there. Let me go here with Dallas Goedert now. We're getting here where guys are going to have to get their ass kicked a little bit here by Big Sills. And Dallas Goedert's one of my favorite Eagles. Dude, you're now starting to sound like 49er guy. If we play 10 times out of 10 on good footing, we beat the Chiefs. No, you don't. You're not good enough to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. You're not good enough. You're not good enough to overcome the coaching and the quarterback. You're not good enough. When they could beat you with a lesser team and you have the greatest roster in Eagle history and you can't beat them, you're never beating them. You're never beating them. Get that through your mind. The roster you have now has some great upside, but it's not the roster of a year ago. You're a lesser of a team, and you think you're going to go into Arrowhead and beat them? It's not happening. And if I play 10 out of 10, if the field and the surface, that the same surface that the Chiefs played on, what an absolute dumb branch to walk out on. You know, it'd be one thing if the Chiefs played on a different field. But they played on the same field the Eagles played on. And they came down from 10 points back to beat you. And you're going to say something like that to give fuel to something where someone looks at you and goes, now you're making excuses up for the incompetent play in the fourth quarter. Now you start getting shots thrown back at you. Bro, play better. You guys didn't play good enough. You didn't coach good enough. You couldn't overcome Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes with nobodies. They beat you with Juju Smith-Schuster. Case closed. There were three significant players on the Kansas City Chiefs. Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and the quarterback. And you couldn't stop those three. Three guys beat that roster and the coach because your coaching staff is inexperienced. And it showed it in big games. That's right. I wish they could leave the Super Bowl in the past. It is what it is. Next season is a full swing. Look, it's good to be fueled by it. But to go public and go, well, if we played those guys 10 out of 10 times, we beat them. You've played them 2 straight years and you've been beaten by them. How do you justify that? How do you justify saying that if you played, get this, look how stupid Dallas Goedert looks. He looks like an asshole. You've played them 2 years in a row and were beat. And get this, they beat you at Lincoln Financial. Your own surface. Your own surface. They came to your field and beat you. And then you turn around and say, well, If we play 10 times, we beat them 10. When you've lost 2 in a row to them in 2 consecutive years. Dallas, I'm very disappointed in this guy. Seriously, man. You can't justify your comment when they've come to your ballpark and beat you and ran the ball for 238 yards on you. They've outplayed you in a point where they had to have a comeback in the Super Bowl to beat you, and they did. And they beat you in your own barn. Danko's clearly a problem with the field. What was the problem in Philly when they beat you? Hey, Dank, was there a problem in Philly when Kansas City beat them too? What's the problem there? What's the excuse why they beat you in Philly? What's the excuse? What's the excuse? Give me a good one why Kansas City beat you in Philly. You weren't as talented. You were last year. You were the more talented team. Oh, I see. So last year, the year before, you weren't as talented. Then you became more talented. So now it's the field. Wow. Holy shit. This is embarrassing. I'm going to move off the topic because you're embarrassing yourselves. You're totally embarrassing yourselves. Guys, stop. You're embarrassing yourselves. 1 year, you're not as talented. Here's excuse 1. The next year, it's the field. You're 0-2. If we played 10 times, we beat you 10 out of 10. You're embarrassing yourselves. Stop talking. Okay? You're embarrassing yourselves. Yeah, Alexander, you're right. I'm going to, because you know why? You're too good a fan base for this. Alexander, you're right. You're too good a fan base. And I'm not going to continue to go here. You're right. Okay? You're right. Too good a fan base to get beat up like that, because you're not. I was always under the assumption Eagle people don't make excuses for losing. Bruce got you. We will. All right. We won't be broaching that topic ever again. Okay? Because we're not giving anybody off-ramps any longer to make jerks of themselves. Let's talk about Sirianni here for a minute. Let's talk about Nick. You think Nick is here 10 years? Do you think Nick Sirianni is a guy that will be here longer than what Andy? How about this? You think Nick Sirianni will be here longer than Andy, or as long as Doug? Okay? How long do you see Andy Reid being here? How long do you see Andy? You think, Carl, that he stays here like Andy, like a 10-plus year career? Longer than Doug? 5 most? Andy Reid? Okay. So some of you look at him as a long-term fixture in Philadelphia. I think he's exactly kind of what the front office, I think he's more in line to what they're looking for in a head coach than what Doug was. Okay, 6 years, hard to say. Lots of time. Longer than Doug? Okay, what type of career do you think he's trending towards? Being more like Doug Peterson or more like Andy? Who does he have the characteristics of when you look at Nick Sirianni. People better be careful. Things can turn on you quick. We saw that happen to Doug. True. Absolutely. The organization turned on Doug. And to be fair, Tone, the organization was the first to turn on Doug, and then the fan base turned on Doug. Half of them. The organization turned half the fan base against Doug Peterson with the way that they were operating and the fighting and infighting that they had between the general manager and the head coach. And the fan base picked a side because from what I've learned covering the Eagles over the last couple of years, I would make this point to you. Hey, half liked Doug. Some didn't like Doug. Some thought he should have went. Some thought he shouldn't have went. Well, that's the organization splitting the fan base down the middle to divide you, to weaken you, so that they can make a decision to fire him. And it was planned to do that. That's always when you know an organization is going to fire you, when they split the fan base. And the fan base either chooses or says it's time to go, like they did with Andy. That's when you know the writing's on the wall. You see that everywhere, what an organization will do. Like, look at what's going on in New England right now. They're laying the seeds that if Kraft has to make a strong decision to move Belichick upstairs, Belichick is saying one thing publicly, and Kraft is saying another thing publicly. Those are the seeds that are being spread out now, and we'll determine how this plays out this year on what Bob Kraft's next move will be in the offseason. So you'll always know when they divide the room. The front office divided the Eagle fans on Doug Peterson. Nick will be here as long as Hurts continues to process and progress. Greasy, that's totally, it's the psychology of being able to move off of a legendary coach or a guy who's delivered something. Hey, for them to be able to move off Doug Peterson, they had to divide the fan base. They couldn't sit here and have the fan base be in love with a man that delivered something that the city hasn't seen since 1960 without a reason. Well, infighting, quarterback decision, quarterback's not playing well, roster moves, questioning wins on Monday if you win 17-14, constant meddling in the game day Sunday roster on who plays and who doesn't. Don't you understand? When you become more of a micromanager on your head coach, the writing's on the wall for you because the coach is going to bitch. And it became Howie versus Doug. And that's how they fired him. It's surely you know this. That's how you get rid of people. You divide your fan base, your season ticket holders. I'm sure what the outcome of this season will be, but Sirianni must, I'm not sure what the outcome of this season will be, but Sirianni must get through this season unscathed. If the Eagles flop, all eyes are on him. Yeah, because if you could fire Andy Reid and Doug Peterson, Nick Sirianni's not safe. You understand that. Nick Sirianni has not built up the equity those other two guys have. You fired a coach that won a Super Bowl, and you fired a Hall of Fame coach. If you could fire those guys were fired. And there's arguably the two most successful coaches in the history of the franchise. Outside of Vermeil, you fired the two most successful coaches in the history of the Eagles. Sirianni safe? I don't think so. Okay? Nick has to perform every year because he's as interchangeable as a cornerback. That's why he doesn't get it. See, I really disagree with a lot of people that say that he has say over his coaching staff because he does not. The coaches are handpicked. So truly, Nick Sirianni being the player coach that he is, you thought he'd piss one of his players off by bringing Matt Patricia in. How many people actually believe that Nick Sirianni hired Matt Patricia. So what? He could piss off one of his players? Why would he do that? You really think that's his decision? That was an organizational decision. They make the calls. He doesn't do that. That's totally because they don't know what they have in Sean Desai. And because you're going to be playing against AFC East teams. You're going in week 1 against Belichick. You just don't know what you got in your coordinator. Okay? So, personally, again, here's how I see Sirianni going into this year. Of all the coaches, now they've kind of insulated him. Why? Because he didn't hire the coordinators. He didn't hire them. And again, all you have to do is go back to the Super Bowl press conference. When he came to Philly, hey, the first thing I had to do was introduce myself to all my coaches. Those were his words. The coaches were already in place. They were hired by the front office. I didn't know many of the coaches that were here. I had to introduce myself. His words. Okay? Am I wrong? Those were his words at the Super Bowl press conference. Okay? They had the coaches in place when they hired Doug. It's so crazy to think. So really, you think Nick Sirianni has any say over what coaches or what players get drafted to this organization? You're out of your mind. Now, do I think he's built more equity up? I do. But here's why Nick is going to be a better coach than Doug. To the Eagles, will he have the same success? That I don't know. That goes back to what Tone said. Okay? Here's what he knows, though. And we've spoken of this. He knows how to play the game. He knows if you win, you get more say. Who in their right mind is going to trust a coach? So get this. Think about this for a minute. There's some people in here and in the media in Philly that believe that a coach who's never had a head coaching position in his entire life and is as young as he is, has the experience to hire assistant coaches when he's only been a coordinator and a position coach for 6 years. You think that guy has enough knowledge to run the Eagles? You're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. Why do you think Sean McVay hired a guy like Wade Phillips? He hired the most experienced coordinator he could possibly find. But guess who did that? Les Snead and Kevin Demoff. It wasn't Sean McVay. They hired that guy. You know how I know that? John Gruden told me. Why? Because Sean McVay was the ball boy for the Buccaneers 6 years earlier and a quality control coach in Tampa. Do you know what that is? Go get me a crumb cake and coffee. But he can hire assistant coaches, right? So a coach with that least experience has a treasure trove of assistant coaches that he can hire. Out of your mind. That's why a lot of the old coaches back in the day had and were given. Do you know why certain coaches get? Hey, I never thought. Hey, Tone, I guess people didn't know this. Why do you think certain coaches get hired over and over again? Why do you guys think certain coaches get hired over and over again? Do you know? And again, it's got a race face to it too. Sure, okay, because it's the same bums. But why do you think? Because these guys have connections to assistant coaches and to really being able to put together good staffs and having the right assistant coaches with them. They have that coaching, as Yale said, they have a coaching network where they can get Vic Fangio to come in, or they can get Brian Schottenheimer to come be my coordinator, because they've worked with Holmgren. They've worked with Mike Shanahan. They've worked with some of these other guys. Why do you think you see here? This is what you got working on now in Philly. Do you understand that the Philadelphia Eagles, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Indianapolis Colts, and the Arizona Cardinals are all tied back to Frank Reich and Doug Peterson? All the coaches, and now maybe even the Browns. The Browns are a little bit of that too. You're going to be able to pick from those coaches. Sirianni's coaching ability to be able to find certain coordinators now is expanding. It probably goes back to Andy. Okay, if you want to go back that, probably because Frank Reich didn't, I don't think he ever worked for, but Sirianni worked for Frank in San Diego when he was the offensive coordinator. Nick was the wide receiver coach. And then they brought all those guys to Indianapolis when Frank was the head coach in Indy. And Mike McCoy, if you remember right, I told you this story. Mike McCoy was the head coach of the Chargers. Well, Mike McCoy now is on the coaching staff with Doug Peterson in Jacksonville, and Frank worked for him. This is all of the networks where you get your assistant coaches from. And when you have a guy who's 26 years old and never been in a system long enough, you don't have connections and a network of coaches that you can go to. Organizations know that. That's why they have the control, and that's why you see so many young faces at the coaching position. You don't see old coaches getting hired anymore, do you? That's by design. Coaches like John Gruden and those old coaches, they're dinosaurs. You see the Stefanskis, the Gannons, the Steichens, guys with no experience. But that's what organizations want because they have more control over the roster and the assistant coaches. It's totally by design. They believe in the sabermetrics. The National Football League has gotten more to that instead of gut feeling on drafting. That's why the Brandon Staley's, who's that? You're not going to see the Mike Martzes being hired any longer. You're not seeing any of that. You were never going to see a guy like Lincoln. As much as WIP bullshitted you and told you that Lincoln, he was never going to be the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. Financially, he wasn't in the works too. He made $10 million at Oklahoma. Not happening. Okay? So again, now, but Nick has been told and groomed by Frank. You want this? Frank Wright recommended him to you. You didn't. Hey, Tone. Here's another case of Eagle fans trying to change the narrative of Nick Sirianni. You fucking hated him. You hated the hire. Now you love him. Same as your quarterback. Because you didn't know him. Frank Reich, the first time he came on this program, told you he recommended Nick Sirianni when they were doing the Carson Wentz trade. I said, you recommended him? He goes, yes. I said, who'd you recommend him to? He said, the owner. Right here. He recommended Sirianni. And then the ball began to roll for him to become the head coach. Frank Reich recommended him. And Frank said on this program, hey, got to remember something. Philadelphia has a different way of doing things. The front office has a lot of say. These are Frank's words that worked in an organization. And by the way, Frank also admitted on this program, he was going to be the offensive coordinator if he didn't get the Carolina Panther job. Facts. You can have all the crazy-ass theories and opinions. I bring people that were in the room, that know the room, that coached in the room. There's no opinion here. I'm telling you what the guys that worked for him, won Super Bowl for you, and conference championship for you, said here on our program. You can think he has say, you can do it. I'm telling you what it is. Andy suggested Doug. Okay. And Frank suggested Nick. Okay. No, from what I understand, the owner of the Eagles asked Andy about Doug, and then Andy signed off on him. Said, yeah, no, he should get an opportunity. Okay? Isn't it funny? When the Eagles went away from using that system of hiring coaches, they land on Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly wasn't a bad coach here. He just made poor personnel decisions. And he didn't know how to run an offense because it destroyed his defense. 2 10-plus win seasons. Got you Lane Johnson. Brought Jeff Stoutland in. Numerous things that still affect. And by the way, he got rid of football players that had no bearing on your 17 title game. I know some of you guys disagree with me on this, but whether or not Shady McCoy or Dexter Jackson was on the team had no bearing on the team winning the Super Bowl in 17. They did nothing with those players anyway. And when they dumped them, got rid of them, they won a Super Bowl 3 years later. I don't know. Didn't seem to need them that bad. And they got cheaper. Now, is it a shitty way to handle people? Yeah, sure. But when you see Dexter Jackson or Shady McCoy talking shit on Chip, at the end of the day, dude, 3 years later, they won a Super Bowl. They didn't need you. And the years prior to that, what were you doing for them trying to win a Super Bowl? You didn't win one. They won without you. The whole collection of you guys, actually. So you can say whatever you want about Chip dumping those guys. At the end, 3 years later, they won a Super Bowl. Shit, man, maybe it was 2 years later. Was it 2 years later you won a Super Bowl? So you get rid of all those guys, and 2 years later you won a Super Bowl. I don't know. Yeah, but those were some of my favorite players. I get it. Jerseys on the name on the back, favorite colors and numbers and all that. I get all that. You fall in love with some of your players, but at the end of the day, those guys had no bearing, zero, on your winning a Super Bowl. Zero. And he hired the second best coach, maybe even the greatest assistant coach in Eagle history next to Jim Johnson and Jeff Stoutland. Say whatever you want. And again, do I think Chip was a good NFL guy? No, I do not. But he wasn't the train wreck you paint out. Because some of the moves they made affected your 2017 Super Bowl. Lane Johnson's in the building. Some of the other draft choices they had. Okay. Was he a jackass? Yes. Did he wear his defense out? Yes. Did he think you could run 85 offensive plays in an NFL game? Yes. All stupid, for sure. He's a college guy. Okay? Yale goes, you need to get along with people. You mean like Belichick? You mean like Bill? There's no doubt his bedside manner and his ability to be able to talk to his team was a complete result in his lack of success. And to go to the college ranks is always a joke. Very few times You got to remember something. Pete Carroll didn't have success first in the college ranks. Pete had a winning record with the Jets and the Patriots combined. Then he got fired in New England. Then he got the Southern Cal job. Hey, you guys know the story? He used to hang out with John Wooden, and John Wooden said exactly what Yale said. Hey, you don't have to actually totally 1,000% get along with your players, but they have to respect you. And they have to believe what you're telling them is the truth. They have to believe you have their best interest at mind. And his bedside manner was totally a problem. I'm not disagreeing with that. That's what makes him a college coach. Same with Nick Saban. Hey, how about this? Chip Kelly had more success in Philly than what Nick Saban did in Miami. He was a better NFL coach than Saban. Do you ever think of that? Chip Kelly was a better NFL coach than Nick Saban. Somebody go, no, he wasn't. He was. He was a better NFL coach. Had a winning record. Chip's way was not sustainable. You can't run 80 plays. You can run 80 plays when you got a 100-man scholarship roster. Okay. Do me a favor. Don't forget. Hey, by the way, 60 names have been mentioned for the Hall of Fame today. I want to talk with Jason Cole. That'll be at 5:30 Eastern time. Hit the like button. Keep it here on the National Football Show.